And so during 71, the group had Shalem down in Perth at Armidale as the headquarters, and they had Karanya up at Karoo, which is where when new people came into the group, they had to adjust themselves to the lifestyle. They had to give up drugs, they had to give up alcohol, they had to give up cigarettes, they had to give up bad language, they had to give up gossiping about all sorts of garbage. So they had to make quite a few changes, and some couldn't make the changes and they were out. And those who could make the changes and settle down, they went to Krania. Even the drug squad came down to check it all out, because sometimes there'd be, you know, you drive past and there'd be somebody laying out on his back, out on the paddock, just laying there like that, and like he's a dead body. But they'd go back and ring the drug squad and say, you better go down there and see what they must be on sort of dope or something. But I mean, that was their means of meditation. So, you know, that was quite normal.
Just a lack of understanding.
Yeah, that's right. And when the drug squad came down, they went back and gave it a clean bill of health and says there's no drugs there. There's just people meditating. So anyway, I mean, there wouldn't be drugs. I know what Mum would just have a fit if she saw sort of drugs there, or even alcohol or cigarettes. That was totally out. She wouldn't have a bar of it. I think about 74, 75, it was obvious that they had to grow, they had to expand. There was no scope in Karoo for work, for people to work. I mean, there's just farms and you get a little bit of work for some of the blokes, but none of the women could get work, and a group that size needed an income and they needed to work. So, and they had thought, well, they could perhaps buy the farm, but I wasn't going to sell, and I mean, they didn't want to buy 2,500 acres just to have 20 acres of community. You couldn't subdivide, so the decision was then made to shift to Balingup, where you've got beautiful soil, plenty of water, and good climate, and plenty of work opportunities in the surrounding district.
Here is the central created universe. It is a spiritual universe, and these are the outer.
It is this man who has been both a saviour to the unsettled and searching young people and a villain to anguished parents. Fred Robinson, looking something like a 20th century Methuselah, founded the Universal Brotherhood several years ago. For the past 40 years he's been spreading his own kind of gospel with a back-to-nature philosophy. Now aged 85, Fred still plays a major role in the running of the commune. Most of his day is taken up teaching children about the universe, about God, and about Armageddon.
I think it's inevitable under present conditions unless they change their outlook.
Why?
Why? There's only one. If you persist in going like a horse with blinkers on and just diving straight ahead, irrespective of the fact that you're coming to a precipice, well, inevitably you must go over the precipice. We're bringing up the children now to understand what is right and what is wrong. It's not a complicated matter at all. A thing is either, according to God's standard of creation, good, true and beautiful, or it isn't.
People have been doing that for years, and yet
no, they haven't really had the advantage of what we call modern revealed knowledge. They've been fumbling in the dark. All the past attempts to explain man and spirit and heaven and hell and God and the universe, it was all largely speculation. It wasn't until this explosion of knowledge since 1848 and the generation gap where these children now, they can understand, they know all about electricity and magnetism and atoms and all manner of things that have to be known to understand how the universe works.
Why do so many people shun the natural environment?
For the simple reason you've been conditioned for ages to accept a man-made polluted civilization.
And yet there are people who come here and stay in the community, and also people who go who don't like it. Why is that?
Well, this is a pioneering job. Now, you'll never get pioneers to be the majority of the community. Once the pioneering has been done, then the others come in on it. There's always got to be the pioneer. and they're very, very scarce. Only a very small percentage of the population are born pioneers.
But haven't there been communities like this one for many years?
There's never been a community in the past exactly like this. In a sense, where principles are concerned, yes, the Essene Brotherhood, all the real genuine brotherhoods of the past, I don't mean those that got perverted, but there's always been the real genuine teachers on this planet, ever since what we call the Lucifer Rebellion. But they've been a very, very small minority, and they were living in secluded little places and the world passed them by.
Will they be anything ever than just a small minority?
No, this is going to spread and become the whole world system. Strangely enough, it might sound mad, but there's a principle at stake, a policy and a principle. You're either working with God and nature or you're not. It wasn't everybody that came that could really harmonise with what we were doing. Not everybody that came.
Would that apply to most people, that they wouldn't be able to adjust to this kind of existence?
No, it applies more to the young generation than the middle and the old generation. The young generation, this side of the generation gap, they're not tied down with mortgages or obligations or family responsibilities or whatever have you. They're more free to move and to venture into new fields. This is a universal way of life.
Well, I first saw Fred at the very first Nimbin Festival. It was 1970, I don't know, was it 3? Might have been, or 2, something like that. And I was just a young girl living in Sydney, but I knew on the outskirts of all the people who were putting that festival together. Now all, new age. But to me, the only new age thing there was Fred. He was in this stage in the middle of this paddock and he just was there talking. Every time I went by, I stopped to listen. He was so interesting. And a lot of things he said actually really clicked. He said things like, get out of the cities. He was on about flying saucers and that a bit. But very inspirational to the mind, I knew nothing, and I heard him, and I knew, I understood what he was saying, and I was into it.
My initial impression was that the thing was fabulous, and that music was being created, art was being created, and the kids were getting a great education. I think it was only later when individuals were ostracised from the community. I mean, if you love your brother, whatever he does, you don't stop loving him. So if your brother is a junkie and he robs a kind of shop, that doesn't mean you stop loving him. Whereas in the commune, if someone did something wrong, they were totally ostracised. So that love suddenly disappeared, which is not real love. And I think that was one of the things that really turned me off. Prior to that, there'd been the breastfeeding incident, which, in this day and age, I think most women would pop a boob out and feed a baby. And to be banned from doing that seemed a bit strange at the time. And then I guess the follow-on from that was the chucking out of and ignoring people who had previously been members of the commune and so-called loved, but in fact not loved.
Okay, my parents lived in Balingup, and as I did at the time when the commune came here. I've been here for 4 or 5 generations, so I was sort of connected with the Balingup community, who was quite hysterical about the commune coming here. They came down from Karoo and bought the property, etc.
Hysterical?
Yes, worried, as quite radical and not knowing what to expect, etc. And heard all the bad rumours about what to expect and things like that, which the commune didn't turn out to be anything like that. Basically, with my parents and the people they mixed with, they talked about what they thought the commune was, and I sat back and listened and didn't really think it was that bad. But being so much younger at the time, I was probably a teenager. I would have been a teenager at the time, so I didn't think it was that bad. With Fred, I did know him, but not really personally to speak to. I remember Stephen doing concerts at the Balingup Town Hall, and particularly part of one of Stephen's poems, and he was he was saying, the world is but an atom floating endlessly in space. And I don't remember the rest of the poem or the rest of the concert, but I know that we went, my parents went, etc., and most of the Balingup community went. So it was a good chance to mix and get to know.
What did the community think of that concert? Did it help build bridges?
I think in some ways it did, even though verbally people still kept their prejudices, because they're not going to give them up easily. But I think it lessened the fear, if you know what I mean. I remember later on being told by my parents about Fred when there was a bit of a coup here and Fred had to leave, etc. And my parents saying about Fred going around Balingup, knocking on doors, trying to find somewhere to live in the middle of winter, somebody that would take him in. I don't know what the outcome of that is. I presume he did, but I know that he died soon after that.
Impression at the beginning, one's impression of when one's told there's a hippie commune coming to town, you have visions of a commune, not a hippie commune, but you have visions of a hippie group smoking pot and taking their clothes off and this sort of stuff. Whereas you were obviously a totally different group, and probably rather puritanical, and probably older than I expected too. What was the average age of the group?
It would have been middle 20s.
25s, yeah.
25.
Yeah, so there weren't many teenagers around. So I think they were older than we expected, and certainly much more puritanical. And obviously love was part of the creed. So at that wedding party we went to, love was obvious, that everyone seemed to love each other, which was great.